activity or a whole lot of really anything to listen to the person, but you can't imagine what this person is trying to go through, trying to communicate with you, okay? So don't pretend to understand. It's appropriate that if you don't understand what this person is saying, that you can ask them to tell you in a different way, or you can ask them additional questioning to get whatever answer that you're trying to get from them. Okay, service animals. Okay, recently the law changed in regards to service animals. There's also another resource on your handout that will give you some very specific information about the law. However, service animals at this point are any dog that is individually trained or can be individually trained by the person with a disability to work or perform a task that is a benefit of the person with a disability. And those tasks are directly related to the person's disability. Some other species of animals at this point, it used to be considered that any animal would be a service animal as long as it's performing a particular service to the person with a disability. And that has changed to only dogs. So no other animals at this point are service animals except miniature horses. Don't ask me why, but under certain conditions, miniature horses are also considered service animals. Okay, major considerations when generating possible listings. Again, the transportation lines being close. Is the property architecturally appropriate for the person? Does it have stairs? Does it have a shower? Recently, my agency actually went into a lawsuit with Cornerstone developers because they were receiving monies for providing accessible housing, except it wasn't built accessibly. And the biggest piece of evidence that we had was a young lady in a wheelchair sitting at the door because there was a step up. She couldn't get into the apartment. And these are supposed to be the accessible housing condominiums. So, just taking those types of things, and just like Christine talked about, when she saw the house with the roll-in shower, she knew that that was hers. Okay, not every house, unfortunately, has a roll-in shower. Okay, so making those modifications can be very pricey. And unfortunately, when we talk about modifications that need to be done for a person with a disability, although they can try and deny the person with a disability the modifications, but under the law, they're allowed to provide whatever modifications as long as they're reasonable to whatever property that they're living in. However, it is at the person with the disability's expense. So if you have a property that really needs a lot of work to be retrofitted, then you have to kind of consider the out-of-pocket expense to that person with a disability. Again, the person with a disability, is it a child, is it an adult? Do they have accessible amenities? If they have a child that's in a wheelchair that wants to access the pool or anything like that, are they able to? Pet-free policies in regards to service animals. Well, obviously, if a condo has a pet-free policy, a service animal is not a pet, okay? So it would be allowed. It would be able to be asked as a reasonable accommodation for that person that has the disability. And just to illustrate a story that I've had of an actual case, we worked with a young lady who had no arms and no legs, okay? She lived in a condo with her boyfriend. Boyfriend was kind enough to open the doors for her to let her in and out of the condo building. Things with the boyfriend went south. Boyfriend moved out. Now she can't get out of the condo. So she asked the condo association to make a reasonable accommodation by providing her with an automatic door button that she could push that would open the doors for her at her expense. They denied her the request. Okay? This went into the Equal Opportunity Office. They filed civil rights violations, and they still would not comply with the reasonable accommodation. So it took her actually civilly suing them, and even after she civilly sued them, they still would not comply. So she ended up having to get a judgment against them and everything else, and it was a long, long road. But all of this just based on one accessibility modification that she needed. Okay, so we're still unfortunately seeing problems. I know I see a lot of you nodding your heads like, oh my gosh, we're still seeing these types of problems currently, even though the law has been on the books for years. And I just want to use the school district parallel. A lot of people that contact you, I understand they're interested in, is it in a good school area? Is the district okay? What type of ratings do, the schools have in this particular area? And a lot of people are concerned with that type of thing. Well, when we talk about catchment area and you're working with people with disabilities, some of the things that you really need to consider, just like a school district, you kind of need to do your homework as far as hospitals and medical facilities. Are they going to be accessible? Are they going to be fairly close for this person? Entitlement offices, such as VA offices, such as Social Security offices, things like that, as well as social service offices. You may want to ask them, hey, do you have any places that you visit frequently that you really want to be close to? And do your research and get back to that person, because they may be buying a house based on where those services are most accessible for them. So really just taking those things into consideration. And that's it. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
You brought up the service dogs, or they're now only dogs.
Yes.
Is that with when you have somebody living in an apartment or a house, if they're a renter, does that apply to those as well?
It does, and actually, the ADA law is very different from the fair housing law in regards to service animals and therapy animals and emotional support animals. The fair housing law is actually more inclusive than the ADA. So the fair housing law may actually have some additional animals that they cover under that particular setting. Okay. Uh-huh. Yes, ma'am.
In that example where if she had been granted the ability to put in the push button,
Right.
Does she also have the responsibility to maintain it if it breaks down? Would that transfer to the association and say when she was ready to move, is she then responsible to take them back out?
This is a really good question.
Repeat the question for the
I'm sorry. And to repeat the question, once the person with a disability asks for an accessible modification, like the case example where she asked for the push button, is it her responsibility to then maintain it, or is it her responsibility to remove it once she moves? There are some specific rules in regards to that as far as maintenance and removal. And there has to be some agreement in writing with the accommodation request that would stipulate who is maintaining this particular, whatever the accommodation is, and the removal process. If the condo association wanted it removed once she moved out, then that would be part of that agreement. Or if she didn't, or let's say she ran out of money and could not maintain that, there is certain restrictions for undue burdens to the particular condo association. So they could basically turn around and civilly sue her if they wanted to. But there is very specific things written into the reasonable accommodation requests that would be talked about upon asking for the reasonable accommodation.
So it's done on an individual basis then?
Typically, yes, because it's the person with a disability that knows what accommodations they specifically need. And it's up to them. And they can deny a request if it's unreasonable, which means that it is undue financial burden for them in the long run. And there are some other stipulations also that if it is unreasonable, then they can rule and say no and give the reasons why. And at that point, usually if the person with a disability seeks to pursue that, they can go to their equal opportunity office and they will pursue that in court. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Yes?
Do you see any of the accommodations, modifications getting funded through like FHA 203K kind of accommodation?
Yes. There's also local resources and state resources that will help with modifications, such as Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, if it's a barrier to them being out and able to get employment and things like that. There's also some counties and state funding for, our particular county in Palm Beach has a community and urban development, and they offer some grant monies that are available to individuals that are seeking modifications. So there are some avenues to get those modifications covered if the person with a disability who is typically on a fixed income cannot afford to make those accommodations. Yes, ma'am.
Are syndromes and disorders considered disabilities?
Yes, they can be if they impact a major life activity. In major life activity, you're talking about being able to balance a checkbook, being able to function as an adult. I mean, just various things that you would think of in your day-to-day could be a major life activity. And if those are somehow one or more is impacted by the disability, then that would be considered a disability.
I work with a fellow who has Asperger's, and his request is when he tours the house, he doesn't want anybody in there.
Yep.
But he was an airline pilot, and he's paying cash. But that's his, it's kind of hard to explain that to the listing agent, that we don't
Sure.
want anybody home.
Sure. Yep. You can just ask for, you can just tell the listing agent, hey, listen, this man is asking for a disability accommodation, and this is what his accommodation request is. So, and then try and work with them the best you can.
I'm a little, I don't know whether he would like me to share that with the other agent, because you can't look
Ask
at him
him.
and tell that he has.
The best thing to do is ask him. Just be like, look, listen, I need to disclose this, and is that okay with you if I disclose this in order to get your accommodation met? Because there are certain criteria under asking for reasonable accommodation that would provide for you to be able to disclose certain information. Okay, all right. Oop.
We'd like to thank you very much for coming and joining us today, Florida Chapter CRS, Disabilities. If you feel so inclined, Gina is there with the donation bucket, and we appreciate you being with us and anything that you can do to support these great, worthwhile projects. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you all.